Once upon a quiet morning, when the sky was the soft blue of a robin's egg and the sunlight arrived like a slow, warm yawn, a forest woke up. It did not hurry. Dew rested on every leaf and blade of grass, sparkling like tiny lanterns that would soon blink away. A brook whispered to the roots of old trees. Ferns unfurled one delicate curl at a time. Far above, the tallest pines lifted their sleepy crowns and let the wind comb through their needles with a peaceful hush. In that forest, where paths wandered as gently as thoughts and moss made cushions of stones, there stood a small wooden cottage. It had round windows that caught the morning light and a stout little chimney that pointed politely at the sky. Ivy climbed the walls in a friendly tangle, and just beneath the kitchen window, a patch of herbs, mint, thyme, and a sprig of rosemary, leaned into the sun. If you had stepped closer, you might have smelled warm wood, a hint of pine smoke, and the memory of yesterday's honeyed oats. 3 bears lived in this cottage. Not the sort of bears that storm or roar or stamp about, but a family that moved with the forest's own gentle rhythm. They were Papa Bear, who was steady as a hillside, Mama Bear, who was soft as sunlight through curtains, and Baby Bear, who was small and curious and very good at listening to little sounds, like the plip of a drop in a puddle, or the tick-tick of a beetle on a windowsill. Papa Bear woke first. He always did. He stretched in a long slow line from paws to ears, the way trees stretch at dawn. He opened the cottage door to let the morning inside. The cool air walked in with quiet steps. Birds tried out their voices, warming them like instruments before a concert. Papa Bear breathed deeply. "Good morning, Woods," he rumbled, but in a voice so low and kind that even the shyest rabbits did not scurry off. Mama Bear woke next, smoothing the quilts, patting the pillows into soft clouds. Her fur caught the light in warm browns and honey golds. She tied on her apron, embroidered with little green leaves, and smiled at the thought of breakfast, something simple, something comforting, something that filled the cottage with a feeling of all is well. She padded to the hearth, where last night's ashes waited like quiet snow, and coaxed a new fire to life. Flames answered with a friendly crackle, and the room began to glow. Baby Bear woke last, as small ones sometimes do. He sat up slowly, blinking, listening. "Who?" said an owl far away, very faint in the brightening day. The brook answered with a shhh that might have been a secret or might have been a lullaby still lingering. Baby Bear smiled and slipped from bed to floor, his little paws making soft pat-pat sounds on the smooth wooden boards. He liked the sound his paws made. He liked the way morning tasted in the air, cool at first, then warm, like the first sip of porridge. "Good morning," Mama Bear sang, and her words seemed to float through the cottage like steam from a teacup. "Good morning," Papa Bear hummed, and his words seemed to be made of tree rings and river stones. "Good morning," said Baby Bear, and his words seemed to hop like a chipmunk over pine cones. The cottage liked mornings, too. The table by the window waited, ready to hold bowls and spoons. The kettle waited for water. The shelf waited for the wooden box of oats and the jar of honey that looked like a small piece of sunshine saved for later. Mama Bear filled a pot with water from the pitcher and set it over the fire. The flame approved with a soft whisper. Papa Bear measured oats the way he measured everything, carefully, cheerfully, with a sense that there is a right pace for every task and that the right pace is never hurried. A pinch of salt. A patient stir. The wooden spoon made circles that looked like rings on a pond after a tossed pebble. Baby Bear stood on a little stool and peeked into the pot, eyes round as 2 buttons. "It smells like warm mornings," Baby Bear said. "It smells like home," said Mama Bear. "It smells like being ready for the day," said Papa Bear. While the porridge grew plump and velvety, Mama Bear set the table. 3 bowls, each with its own favorite place, a big bowl that felt heavy and honest in Papa Bear's hands, a middle bowl that fit exactly right in Mama Bear's paws, and a small bowl that always waited for Baby Bear with perfectly sized edges for perfectly sized spoonfuls. There were 3 chairs at the table, too. You might have expected that. A big chair with a back as sturdy as a tree trunk. A middle chair with a quiet curve, as though it had learned the shape of Mama Bear's shoulders and liked to match them. and a small chair that had a little rocking whisper in its legs, because Baby Bear sometimes liked to sway, just a little, when he sat still. Steam began to twirl from the porridge, making faint ribbons in the kitchen air. Papa Bear lifted the pot with care and poured it into each bowl. Plip for Papa. Plip for Mama. Plip for Baby. The sound was gentle and satisfying, like a foot stepping onto a soft path. "It needs a minute to cool," Mama Bear said. She knew about waiting. She knew that some things, if you treat them kindly, become even kinder. Porridge was that sort of thing. "Let's take a little walk," Papa Bear suggested. He knew about mornings. He knew that the forest liked to be greeted, and that a short hello to the day made the day say hello back. Baby Bear clapped once, very softly, as though not to frighten off the quiet. "I want to see if the mushrooms grew," he said. Mushrooms liked to appear as if by magic after a damp night. Baby Bear liked to find them and whisper hello. And so, with the bowls letting out their little clouds of warmth, the three bears stepped outside. The door snuggled into its frame with a contented click. The forest welcomed them. It made a wide, soft place for their paws. It offered them the light that filtered through leaves and slipped across the path like friendly cats. It offered them scents of damp earth and cedar and a sweetness that might have been wild strawberries somewhere nearby. Papa Bear walked at the pace of a good story. Not too fast. Not too slow. He pointed out a spider web strung between two fern fronds, spun with such fine thread that the dew clung to it like stars. Mama Bear touched the fern gently, and the spider web trembled but did not break. "Strong and delicate," she said. She liked things that were both. Baby Bear found mushrooms, round and shy at the base of a birch. He crouched low and put his face very close. "Hello," he whispered. The mushrooms did not answer, not exactly, but the air around them seemed very pleased to be noticed. A breeze moved through the high branches. It carried faraway birdsong closer, then let it drift away again the way lullabies drift into dreams. Papa Bear lifted his nose and breathed it all in. Mama Bear watched the light move, square by square, across the path. Baby Bear tried to step on the same patches of light as they slid along, as though he were walking on slow, golden boats. They came to their favorite bend in the brook. It was a small place, a simple place, but the water liked to tell stories there, over and over, never tired of them, always finding a new way to say the same true things. The bears listened. Papa Bear heard steadiness. Mama Bear heard comfort. Baby Bear heard a song that liked to hop from stone to stone. "Shall we say good morning to the old pine?" Papa Bear asked. The old pine grew on a little rise beyond the brook. It had watched many winters, and its roots were wise. The bears crossed on the stepping stones, each one an island, each one a promise that if you take your time, you will always find the next safe place for your paw. The old pine stood with its arms wide, patient and evergreen. The bears placed their paws on its bark. It felt cool, even in the growing sun, and rough in a way that made their pads tingle. "Good morning," Mama Bear said softly. "Thank you," Papa Bear added, "for reasons trees always understand." Baby Bear pressed his cheek against the trunk. He didn't know exactly what to say, so he said the truth he had, "I like you." They sat a while beneath the old pine, and the day went on being a day. The sun climbed a little higher, the birds sang a little more clearly, the brook told and retold its small adventures. And in the little cottage, on the wooden table by the round window, 3 bowls of porridge waited politely for the exact right moment when they would be just the way they should be. Not too hot, not too cold, but cozy and kind. At last, Mama Bear stood and brushed a leaf from her apron. "Shall we see if breakfast is ready for us?" she asked. Papa Bear nodded. Baby Bear nodded, too, with both shoulders and both ears, which made him look very serious, though inside he felt gleeful, because the first spoonful of porridge after a gentle walk always tasted like a small holiday. They followed the path home. It knew their steps and seemed to pull them softly onward like a ribbon on the breeze. The cottage waited, as cottages will, keeping the warm part of the morning safe inside while the bright part played in the yard. The door welcomed them back with a tiny sigh, as though it, too, had been on a little walk. The kitchen glowed. The bowls released only the thinnest threads of steam now, not hot enough to rush you, not cool enough to disappoint you, just right enough to invite you to bring your spoon close and listen for the quiet sound porridge makes when it moves. Papa Bear set his big chair back with a respectful scrape. Mama Bear smoothed her placemat and straightened the honey jar so its golden light was exactly where it should be. Baby Bear touched his small chair and felt its gentle rock answer, slow and kind, as if to say, yes, yes, sit, sit. Papa Bear lifted his spoon and smiled at the whole of the moment, the family, the bowls, the hearth, the day just beginning with everything in its right place. Mama Bear lifted her spoon and smiled at the smallness of the moment, the curve of a steam thread, the hush before the first taste. Baby Bear lifted his spoon and smiled because he was Baby Bear, and smiling felt like the way he breathed. They did not yet know that the forest had already begun the next part of the day's story. They did not yet know that a girl with hair the color of sunshine through wheat would wander slowly among the birches, listening as Baby Bear listened, peeking as squirrels peek, and pausing in that way that means I mean no harm, I am only curious. The forest knew. The brook suspected. Even the old pine, who understood about paths and about travelers, felt it in its rings. Today would be a day for gentle meetings and careful lessons. But for now, 3 bears sat at their table in a small cottage in a large, kind forest. They breathed in. They breathed out. They took the first small, careful taste of porridge. And the day, like a good story, like a rocking chair, like a lullaby that never hurries, rocked forward, softly, softly, softly. Papa Bear's spoon sank into the porridge with a slow plop. He lifted it, steam curling gently, and blew across the surface. His breath made tiny ripples, little waves rocking back and forth, as though a soft wind had passed across a golden pond. He tasted. His eyes opened wide. Too hot, Papa Bear said with a chuckle, shaking his head. His deep voice made the porridge bowls tremble ever so slightly on the table, like they, too, were laughing. Mama Bear smiled and lifted her spoon. She blew gently, so gently that the steam only leaned to one side before floating straight upward again. She sipped. Then she sighed and set her spoon down. Too cool, Mama Bear said, but not in disappointment, only in a voice that knew the day was long and the forest generous, and cool porridge was not the end of anything. Baby Bear leaned close to his own bowl. The steam rose slowly, as if waiting for his breath to help it along. He blew, cheeks puffed, and the porridge swirled in a little dance. He dipped his spoon, lifted it, and tasted. His eyes widened, and his small ears lifted, and his smile grew as bright as the sun spilling through the window. Just right, Baby Bear whispered. He tasted again, softer this time, to make sure, and nodded in sleepy satisfaction. But Papa Bear wanted porridge that was not too hot. And Mama Bear wanted porridge that was not too cool. And so, together, the family agreed to take a walk while the bowls rested. Let's see how the forest is doing, Papa Bear suggested. Let's see what flowers have opened, Mama Bear added. Let's see if the squirrels remember me, Baby Bear said, already half out of his chair with excitement. So they left their cottage once more, bowls waiting patiently on the table, spoons resting across them like bridges waiting for travelers to return. The morning had stretched itself taller by the time the bears stepped into the forest. The sun climbed higher between the branches, turning the air into a patchwork quilt of light and shadow. Where the light touched, the moss gleamed green and lively. Where the shadows lay, the forest seemed to hum in its sleep, dark and soft. Papa Bear walked with steady paws, each step like the thud of a drum in a slow, gentle song. Mama Bear walked more lightly, her steps like the swish of skirts across a wooden floor. Baby Bear hopped from one root to another, making a game of the uneven path, his paws pat-pat-patting like a lullaby tapping at a window. Good morning, forest, Papa Bear rumbled. Good morning, brook, Mama Bear added as they passed the stream. Good morning, mushrooms, flowers, squirrels, birds, stones, ants, and clouds. Baby Bear sang, waving at everything he saw. the forest answered in its quiet ways. A sparrow flitted from one branch to another, chirping once, then again, as though acknowledging the greeting. A squirrel twitched its tail and blinked. A cluster of mushrooms seemed to lean a little closer together, as though whispering, "Yes, yes, good morning to you, too." They walked deeper into the woods, and the world offered them its treasures one by one. First, a patch of wild violets, their petals the color of twilight. Mama Bear bent down to smell them, closing her eyes, smiling at their delicate sweetness. "The forest wears its own jewelry," she said softly. Then, a fallen log, thick with moss. Baby Bear scrambled onto it and balanced, arms out wide. "I am taller than the tallest bear," he announced, wobbling. Papa Bear steadied him with one paw, smiling at his courage. Next, a clearing where sunlight spilled freely, making the grass glow. Butterflies floated through the air, their wings like painted leaves drifting down from some secret tree of dreams. The bears sat there a while, watching the butterflies dance. The forest, it seemed, was in no rush. Time in the forest moved differently. Not like a clock ticking, but like a lullaby rocking, back and forth, steady and soothing. They reached an oak tree so large that even Papa Bear's arms could not span its trunk. The bark was rough, patterned with ridges that looked like rivers drawn on a map. "This tree has seen many seasons," Papa Bear said with respect. He placed his paw on its side. Mama Bear placed her paw beside his. "It is wise," she agreed. "It has heard all the songs of the forest." Baby Bear pressed his cheek to the bark. "It feels like the tree is humming inside," he whispered. "Like it's singing to itself, very low." The bears stayed a long while by the old oak, until the breeze shifted and brought them the faintest scent of porridge from far away, oats and honey, softened by waiting. Their breakfast was calling them home. Papa Bear turned toward the path. Mama Bear nodded, her apron catching the light like a soft white cloud. Baby Bear skipped ahead, humming the brook song. The forest parted kindly, letting them through. The sunlight leaned down in long beams, guiding them as though laying golden steps beneath their paws. Birds sang them onward, and the brook offered a soft goodbye with its endless shhh, shhh. At last, the cottage appeared through the trees. Its chimney looked pleased to see them, and the little garden herbs waved their green leaves in the breeze. The round windows reflected the sky, calm and blue. Inside, 3 bowls of porridge waited, still warm, still fragrant, still just right. But something else, or rather someone else, was drawing near to the cottage at that very moment. Someone with hair like spun sunlight, with footsteps light as falling petals, and with a heart not unkind, only curious. Someone the forest had noticed long before the bears had. Her name was Goldilocks. Not far from where the bears had walked, another traveler was moving quietly through the forest. Her name was Goldilocks, and her hair was bright and golden, like the very sun had spun it into soft curls. Whenever the light touched it, it shimmered as though each strand held a piece of morning. Goldilocks was not hurrying. She liked to wander, to pause, to listen. The forest had many voices, and she wanted to hear them all. The path beneath her feet was soft with fallen leaves. Each step she took made the faintest crunch, like the rustle of pages turning in a bedtime book. She bent now and then to look closely at things that others might have walked past without noticing. A ladybug resting on a blade of grass. A feather caught on a bramble, trembling in the breeze. A pebble shaped like a heart, half buried in the moss. Goldilocks whispered hello to each of them, because she felt the forest liked to be spoken to kindly. She stopped beneath a tall birch tree, its bark white and smooth with silver scars. She placed her hand against it. The tree was cool, even though the sun shone down through its branches. "You are strong," she whispered, and the leaves above her shivered softly as if in thanks. A brook crossed her path, and she crouched beside it, dipping her fingers into the clear water. It was cool and quick, racing over stones. She listened to the gurgle, and it seemed to her that the brook was singing, not words exactly, but a tune about traveling, about flowing, about always moving yet always belonging to the forest. She cupped her hands and drank. The water tasted like morning air, fresh, simple, kind. As she walked on, Goldilocks noticed how the sunlight shifted. Sometimes it spilled wide and bright, covering the moss in golden blankets. Sometimes it broke into little pieces, glittering like coins scattered across the ground. Sometimes it disappeared entirely, leaving the air cool and hushed, like a room where someone is about to tell a secret. Goldilocks loved them all, the bright, the glittering, the shadowy. Every corner of the forest seemed to offer her something new. She wasn't alone, not truly. The forest sent her small companions. A butterfly, its wings painted orange and black, floated beside her for a time. Goldilocks matched her steps to its slow, drifting flight, pretending she too could float from flower to flower. A robin hopped ahead, pausing, hopping again, as though guiding her down the path. It tilted its head at her and chirped, then darted forward a few more hops, waiting for her to catch up. Even the breeze seemed to play with her, tugging lightly at her hair, brushing her cheeks, wrapping around her ankles like a kitten weaving between legs. Goldilocks laughed softly. The forest was like a friend who never ran out of games, a friend who whispered, "Come see, come see." At last, Goldilocks stepped into a clearing she had never seen before. It was round and sunlit, as if the trees had stepped politely aside to make a room just for her. The grass was short and soft, sprinkled with daisies that nodded in the breeze. Bees floated lazily from one flower to the next, humming a tune older. It was a cottage. There, nestled against the edge of the trees, stood the bear's home. Its wooden walls glowed honey-brown in the light. Ivy climbed its sides in gentle green spirals. The round windows shone like calm eyes, and the chimney pointed upward, sending the faintest whisper of smoke into the sky. To Goldilocks, the cottage looked as though it had grown there, like a mushroom or a nest, part of the forest, not apart from it. She stood very still, her hands clasped before her. "Oh," she breathed, for the sight of it filled her chest with both wonder and curiosity. She stepped closer, careful not to disturb the daisies at her feet. The garden by the window smelled sweet, mint, thyme, rosemary. She brushed a leaf between her fingers and brought it to her nose. The scent was sharp and comforting at the same time, like warmth and coolness wrapped together. Through the open window, she thought she smelled something else, oats, honey, a hint of cinnamon. Her stomach gave a tiny growl, for she had been walking a long while. Goldilocks reached the door. It was not tall and imposing, but round and welcoming, fitted neatly into the cottage wall. She laid her hand on the latch. She hesitated. Her heart beat softly, not with fear, but with the thrill of wonder. Who lived here? Would they mind if she looked? Was it wrong to be curious, or was curiosity simply a way of saying the world is too beautiful not to notice? The breeze brushed her hair. The brook hummed nearby. The daisies nodded their white heads. The whole forest seemed to whisper, "Look, but gently. Step inside, but kindly." And so Goldilocks, with a breath as soft as a lullaby, pushed the door open and slipped into the bear's cottage. Goldilocks stepped softly into the cottage. The door closed behind her with the gentlest sigh, as if the house itself had exhaled. She paused just inside, her eyes wide, her breath quiet, her heart filled with wonder. The cottage felt warm and safe. The air smelled of porridge, honey, and wood smoke. The light through the round windows spilled across the floor in golden patches, warming the wooden boards. A clock on the wall ticked slowly, as though it, too, was in no rush. Goldilocks looked around. The cottage was simple, but every part of it seemed to belong exactly where it was. A broom leaned in the corner like a polite old friend. A quilt folded on a chair promised comfort. The shelves held jars of dried berries, bundles of herbs, and honey that glowed like captured sunlight. And on the table, waiting patiently, were 3 bowls of porridge. Goldilocks' stomach rumbled softly. She pressed her hand to it and giggled under her breath. She had walked a long way, and the smell of warm oats and sweet honey was like a song calling her closer. She stepped to the table. There was a big bowl, steaming gently. There was a middle-sized bowl, calm and still. And there was a small bowl, sending up a thin ribbon of steam that smelled just right. Goldilocks touched the edge of the big bowl. Warm. She lifted the spoon, dipped it carefully, and blew across the porridge. The steam swirled like a little cloud. She tasted. Her eyes widened. "Oh," she said softly. "Too hot." She set the spoon down, her lips puckered, her tongue fanning at the heat. She laughed at herself, quiet and shy, as though the porridge might laugh too. She turned to the middle bowl. Its surface was calm, no steam rising. She dipped the spoon and tasted. "Oh," she whispered again. "Too cool." The porridge was flat and plain on her tongue, more memory than taste, like a story told yesterday instead of today. Then she tried the small bowl. She blew gently, then took a small sip. Her face lit up. "Just right," Goldilocks sighed. The porridge was warm without burning, sweet without being heavy, gentle as the morning itself. She ate another spoonful. Then another. And before she knew it, the bowl was empty. Her stomach was warm now, full and happy. Her eyelids fluttered just a little. "Oh, that was lovely," she whispered, patting her belly softly. Goldilocks wandered next into the sitting room. 3 chairs waited by the fire. The first was a great, sturdy chair, carved from oak, with a back tall enough to hold even the tallest bear. Goldilocks climbed onto it and settled back. The chair creaked, its arms wide and strong. She swung her legs, which dangled far above the floor. "Too big," she murmured, her voice almost swallowed by the chair's size. It felt like sitting in a grandfather's lap, steady but overwhelming. The second chair was smaller, neat and tidy, with cushions stitched in patterns of leaves. Goldilocks sat down carefully. The chair held her politely, its arms curving gently around her. But it was stiff, almost too proper. "Too straight," she said, shifting uncomfortably. "Like it wants me to sit up forever without a rest." Then she turned to the smallest chair. It was a little rocker, the wood worn smooth, the cushions plump and inviting. She sat, and the chair rocked softly back and forth. Creak, creak, creak. The rhythm was gentle, like the sway of a cradle, like the push and pull of a lullaby. Goldilocks smiled. "Just right." She rocked slowly, letting her eyelids droop, her hands folded in her lap. Back and forth. Back and forth. Back and forth. She might have stayed there forever, rocking in that soft rhythm. But she leaned too far, or perhaps the chair was too small for her, and suddenly, crack. The rocker tilted, the legs gave way, and Goldilocks tumbled gently onto the rug. She sat up, laughing softly at herself. "Oh dear. Poor chair." She brushed the dust from her dress, then stroked the broken rocker as though apologizing. "You were lovely while you lasted." Goldilocks wandered next into the bedroom. It was quiet there, hushed and soft. The curtains were drawn just enough to let in a line of golden light, and motes of dust drifted lazily through it like tiny stars. There were 3 beds. The first was wide and heavy, its blankets thick as winter snow. Goldilocks climbed up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders. She lay back and sank into the mattress. "Too hard," she whispered. The bed felt strong, but unyielding, like lying on a flat stone beneath a quilt. She climbed down and tried the second bed. It was narrower, with a coverlet embroidered with little flowers. Goldilocks lay down and sank deep into the mattress, so deep she felt swallowed. "Too soft," she sighed, wiggling. It was like lying in a cloud that refused to let her go. Finally, she turned to the smallest bed. Its frame was simple, its blanket neatly tucked, its pillow plump and round. Goldilocks slipped under the blanket and lay her head down. The mattress cradled her, firm yet gentle. The pillow held her cheek like a friend's hand. The blanket wrapped her like an embrace. Goldilocks sighed. Just right. Her body relaxed. Her breath slowed. The warmth of the porridge still filled her belly, and the gentle rocking of the little chair seemed to echo in her bones. The forest outside whispered its lullabies, leaves rustling, brook trickling, breeze humming. Her eyes fluttered once. Then again. And then they closed. Goldilocks drifted into sleep. The forest welcomed the three bears back as they walked slowly along the path toward their home. Papa Bear's paws pressed the earth with steady thumps, Mama Bear's steps were light and measured, and Baby Bear skipped in between, humming softly to himself. The sun had climbed higher, warming the moss. The brook's voice was louder now, its silver water sparkling between the stones. Birds swooped and sang, weaving bright threads of sound through the quiet morning. Papa Bear sniffed the air. "Breakfast will be ready," he said in his slow, deep voice. Mama Bear nodded. "The porridge will be perfect by now." Baby Bear rubbed his paws together. "I hope mine is still just right." The cottage came into view, tucked against the trees. The windows glowed in the sunlight, and the chimney pointed upward as though it had been watching the sky the whole time. Everything looked the same. Almost the same. Underscore 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 underscore. The bears stepped inside. The door sighed as it closed, and the kitchen greeted them with the sweet smell of oats and honey. But Papa Bear paused. His brow furrowed. "Someone's been tasting my porridge," he rumbled gently, peering into his large bowl. The spoon rested slightly out of place, and a little mark trailed across the surface. Mama Bear leaned over her middle bowl. "Someone's been tasting my porridge," she said softly. A small dip showed where a spoon had gone in. Baby Bear scrambled to his chair, his eyes wide. He gasped. "Someone's been eating my porridge," he squeaked, "and it's all gone." His little bowl was empty, the spoon resting like a tiny boat on an empty shore. The three bears looked at each other in quiet wonder. Not anger. Not fear. Just the deep, gentle surprise that comes when something you thought belonged only to you has been touched by another. Underscore 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 underscore. They walked slowly into the sitting room. Papa Bear looked at his tall chair. The cushion was shifted, and the armrest bore a faint mark. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," he said, his voice deep but calm. Mama Bear touched her neat chair. The cushion was wrinkled, the back tilted just a little. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," she said with quiet wonder. Baby Bear hurried to his rocker. He stopped, his ears drooping, his eyes wide. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," he said in a small voice, and they broke it. The little chair lay in pieces on the rug, one leg tilted, the cushion fallen aside. Mama Bear bent to comfort him. "We will fix it," she promised, stroking his shoulder. Papa Bear nodded. "Chairs can be mended. What matters most is that you are safe." Underscore 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 underscore. The bears climbed the stairs together, the floorboards creaking softly beneath their weight. In the bedroom, Papa Bear stepped to his bed. He pressed a paw on the quilt and frowned. "Someone's been lying in my bed," he said slowly. Mama Bear smoothed her coverlet, noticing the faint hollow in the pillow. "Someone's been lying in my bed," she said in her gentle voice. Baby Bear clambered to his little bed. His blanket was wrinkled, his pillow pressed down, and there, curled beneath the quilt, was Goldilocks. Her golden hair spread across the pillow like sunlight caught in the sheets. Her cheeks were pink, her breath soft and steady. Baby Bear whispered, "Someone's been sleeping in my bed, and she's still here." Underscore 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 underscore. The three bears gathered close. They did not roar. They did not shout. They looked down at the sleeping girl, and their hearts softened. Papa Bear tilted his head. "She is very small," he said, his voice like distant thunder rolling gently. Mama Bear placed a paw on her apron. "She looks very tired," she whispered. Baby Bear leaned closer. "She looks like me when I played too long in the forest," he said with wonder. Goldilocks stirred. She turned her head, blinked once, twice, then sat up quickly, eyes wide. For a moment, she looked frightened. But then she saw the bear's eyes, not fierce, not sharp, but calm, gentle, steady. "I'm sorry," Goldilocks whispered. Her voice trembled like a leaf in the breeze. "I was walking. I was tired. I was curious. I didn't mean to break, or to take, or to cause any harm." Papa Bear nodded slowly. "You were curious," he said. "The forest is full of curiosity." Mama Bear smiled kindly. "And now you know these things belong to us, and that we like to share only when asked." Baby Bear stepped closer, his little voice soft. "Next time, you can knock. I like visitors." Goldilocks felt her heart loosen, like a knot gently undone. She climbed from the bed, smoothing the quilt as best she could. "Thank you," she whispered. "For being kind. For forgiving me. I will remember." Underscore 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 underscore. Goldilocks walked with the bears to the door. The sunlight outside was waiting, the daisies nodding, the brook singing. She waved to the bears, and they waved back, their paws large and warm. She walked into the forest, her golden hair glowing, her steps lighter than when she had arrived. She carried with her not just the memory of porridge, chairs, and beds, but the lesson that curiosity is good when paired with kindness, and that homes, like hearts, deserve respect. The bears returned to their table. Papa Bear stirred his porridge again. Mama Bear straightened her chair. Baby Bear sat cross-legged on the rug where his rocker had been, smiling at the thought of new friends. They ate together, slowly, happily, the cottage humming with peace. Outside, the forest whispered lullabies. Inside, the bear's cottage breathed warmth. And in the distance, Goldilocks walked toward her own dreams, safe and sound. The end. Or perhaps not an end, but the beginning of many more gentle mornings.